Welcome to another Junior Developer Happy Hour. I'm Brady. My co-host Sam actually has a video that is functioning. I'm still experiencing technical difficulties, so sorry for that. But this is about 3 months into the Junior Developer Happy Hours. We started at some point during quarantine. We recognize that a lot of companies were doing hiring freezes, and it's already so tough to break into the industry to get your first job in tech, even with a good economy. And so just so happened that we were in the same bootcamp alumni group. And so Sam and I connected and have started these meetups. So the way that it typically works is the Slido link, which is in, if you look at the Jitsi chat, down in the lower left-hand corner, there's a little kind of like text, kind of like a, gosh, what do I want to say? Text box, I guess. It's the third icon on the right. And that is where we have do we have a link to the Slido? I'm not sure we do. Here, let me share that in there. So as you think of questions that you would like to ask, that's a really great place to ask the questions so that they can be upvoted and we can make sure that we're answering questions that the most people are interested in hearing get answered. And then if you have any sort of follow-up questions, it's great to ask those right in the Jitsi chat, or if we have resources that we're talking about that we want to link to, that's a great place. Cool. I think that's all I need to say about the meetup. So then I will just tell you all a little bit about me in case someone is new here. I am Brady, and I have been a software engineer for a couple of years now. And I went to a coding boot camp in 2017. I had not really considered going into tech before that, but I did really enjoy learning spoken languages and wasn't sure what I was going to do like when I grew up. And at some point along the way, discovered that learning spoken languages was really fun too. And I got to make cool things, and it offered a lot of flexibility that I was hoping for in a job. So that's what ended up driving me to sign up for the boot camp, and it has been really fun. I got hired on at a company called Trunk Club in Chicago, and now we are officially part of Nordstrom. And I have been working as a front-end engineer for the past year or so, a little bit over a year at this point. So our stack is React, and right now it's Ruby backend. We're probably going to be changing some of that around as we get further absorbed into Nordstrom, like PostgreSQL database. That's enough on me. Sam, why don't you give your intro?
Yeah, I'll just do a quick intro. So I'm Sam. I'm a front-end developer at Lyft. I work on mostly internal tools for the mapping organization. Yeah, I have a long journey that I took to get here. Quick version is I graduated a long time ago during the dot-com bust. Gave up too quickly looking for a job, never ended up working in the industry. Did a bunch of stuff, worked in the mortgage industry until that blew up in 2008. Then I joined the Peace Corps and left and went and lived in West Africa for 3 years. Came back, went to Dev Boot Camp, and was able to break into the industry on my second attempt. And did a whole bunch of stuff, and now I'm here. So that's the quick version. Now let's get started, and maybe Mayuko can give a quick intro for people not already familiar with her. Mayuko?
Sure, sounds good. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me, by the way, Sam and Brady. I'm really excited to be here. My name's Mayuko. You might all know me from my YouTube channel, self-titled Mayuko, where I make videos about tech, career and life. So everything from software engineering, coding stuff, to how to have a tech career, to just lifestyle stuff, like things that I like talking about because I'm still very much human in this very interesting world that we live in. So yeah, my career path has been, I started coding in college, went to UC San Diego, got my computer science degree there. I was in the industry for 6 years right after that. So I worked at Intuit, working on TurboTax and QuickBooks for a little bit. And then I went on to work at Patreon, which is a startup in San Francisco, helping creators get paid for the work that they do. And then right afterwards, I went to Netflix for a year working on their iOS app. During the whole time I was doing iOS development, that's kind of my specialty, doing iOS dev. So if you've ever used the TurboTax app or the Netflix app, my code's in there, which is pretty cool. And yeah, I started my YouTube channel in 2017 as a way to help people find their way through the industry, because I know I've had a lot of my challenges myself. And so I'm hoping to just like provide some insight as well as just help people feel like they belong here, and help kind of figure out the imposter syndrome and everything, and give some tips and advice along the way.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah.
Braidy, are you there?
I'm here. I'm still here.
Just got to check since you don't have the video. Do you?
Yeah.
So for the new people, Braidy usually moderates the questions. So shall we get started? Oh, you want to share your LinkedIn too as well, Braidy?
Heck yeah. All right. Let's see. Get this link. Here it is. There. Cool. So the first question we have here, which technologies are most used for app development?
Yeah. So I definitely more familiar with the iOS side of things. Generally for app development, if we're talking for about everything outside of web development, I'm guessing this is mobile app development as a question. There's generally like kind of 3 groups of technologies. So the major platforms right now are Android and iOS. And so there's iOS native development, which is like a full entire stack created by Apple. And then Android development, which is a full entire stack largely created by Google. And then right in between, you have hybrid development, which is kind of like a in between of both, that exists to help developers create apps for one or the other, or sometimes both by just writing the code once. So if you've heard of products like React Native or Flutter, a lot of them are like you type JavaScript, and then next thing you know, you have like an iOS and Android app. On the iOS tech stack, recently, or at least like today in the industry, everyone uses a programming language called Swift, which is pretty new. It used to be Objective-C. In native app development, you're kind of tied to whatever the kind of like platform manufacturer puts out. So like you use Swift, which is created by Apple, use an IDE called Xcode, which is created by Apple. You develop for iPhone, which is created by Apple. And you can only use a Mac used by Apple. A lot of the patterns and stuff that are used for building the app are also Apple defined. Big surprise. So that's kind of a rough idea of the tech stack. On the Android side, it was Java development for a long time, but then there's a new program language called Kotlin, which is a lot easier to write, as I've been told. You use an IDE called Android Studio, and you use kind of the Android SDK to create everything. I think it's like, when I think about comparing app development to other kind of tech stacks to me feel like the Wild West, because anybody can make anything and that can be the new standard, versus in app development, it's largely decided on by like whoever's manufacturing that phone. So it's a little bit more, I don't know, to me, a little bit more steady and calm, and like feels a little bit more like less wild, I guess. So yeah, that's kind of a brief overview of the tech stacks.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Here, I'm just going to jump into this next question. What's the tech scene like in San Diego?
Ooh, good question. Honestly, if anybody can tell me, that'd be great. Because, well, so tech scene in San Diego is definitely not Silicon Valley. I think like very few places compared to Silicon Valley. I lived in Silicon Valley for 5 years, and I actually recently just moved back. I'm originally from San Diego. I went to college here, so I'm very familiar with the area. This is my hometown. But the tech scene itself is interesting. So generally in San Diego, the biggest industries are the defense, like there's a lot of like defense groups and stuff. I don't know what they're called, military here. So that's kind of like one big industry in San Diego, and then the other one is biotech. And so in the defense world, you have like Northrop Grumman, you have other defense companies that I don't know the name of because I'm not really into that industry. And then biotech, you have companies like Illumina. You have UC San Diego doing a lot of research there. And then as far as like what I don't know, we might consider the tech industry. You also have Amazon, who also recently opened an office here. Apple, GoPro is based in San Diego. Kind of, I feel like that's like on brand for GoPro because there's such an outdoorsy brand in San Diego. People are pretty outdoorsy, especially beach wise. And then also there's a bit of a hardware presence here as well. So like satellites and stuff. So Viasat, they shoot satellites up into the earth and provide internet for people, as well as they have a defense sector as well. And then you also have Qualcomm, who creates chips. So I guess like the tech scene in general, it's like it's not non-existent. And in reality, all these companies are like absorbing a lot of talent from San Diego, or from like the universities in San Diego specifically. But it's not like the Bay Area where like everyone you meet is a software engineer, everyone you meet is in tech. It's a little bit more of a mixed bag there. So yeah, but things are still happening here. There's still a lot of great engineers here. Maybe there aren't as many people here who are like, tech is my life, and like I work 70-hour weeks and stuff. Maybe that's a little uncommon. But yeah, it's here. I think it's always like people say that it's always growing. People are like, oh yeah, it's like San Diego is going to be the next Silicon Valley, or like Salt Lake City is going to be the next Silicon Valley. Everyone's trying to predict it all the time. But who knows? I think there aren't as many like Silicon Valley investors here in San Diego, but there are a few. So I guess we'll see how it goes. It's one of those like, you can be a software engineer in San Diego, but you're probably going to have an easier time finding a job in Silicon Valley. But it is a little bit cheaper to live here. So, and I think a lot more chiller. So I'm enjoying my time. But yeah, we'll see how it goes.
It's cool for me to hear, having never lived in Silicon Valley as an engineer. Like now I know kind of what it's like, what the scene is like in Silicon Valley.
Yeah, it's intense. It's really interesting because the Bay Area is so big and so dense. And if there's like so many different bubbles. Like I think the tech and Silicon Valley bubble is definitely one. And so when I mean bubble, it's like, okay, like you have friends who are in tech, you go to their houses when they have parties, pre-COVID times, and all of their friends are in tech, or you go to a bar and it's filled with like 20, 30, 40 somethings and they're talking about technology. You go to the airport and like, or maybe you're on your way back to Silicon Valley on a flight to San Jose and you hear people like talking about the latest technologies that they announced at some conference somewhere. That's not uncommon in the Bay Area, but there's also lots of other pockets too in the Bay. Like the Bay Area has always been known for kind of being a little bit of an activist hub. And so San Francisco and Berkeley has a lot of that stuff going on. Big Burning Man community in the Bay Area. I'm not a burner myself, but there's a lot of people who are. And then there's a lot of like Asian American community in the Bay Area too, because there's a lot of Asian Americans. So yeah, it's like it's interesting to cross the lines between that in the Bay, but definitely the tech and Silicon Valley bubble is the biggest. And personally, like I moved there because I wanted to be immersed in it and I wanted to see what it was like to be in like the Hollywood of the tech industry. And I feel like I gave it like, good 5 years, but at the end of the day, it was really stressful, I guess. It's great to be surrounded by so many ambitious people who are like really working hard in their career. And I was like, there's still a lot of people who inspire me. But for me, I was like, I'm okay with like a little bit slower pace of living. I like doing other things outside of work. Like tech is an important part of me, but I don't want it to be all of me. It's not all of me. And so moving away has kind of given me that flexibility to just be like, okay, I can like take a step back and not feel guilty from like thinking about tech stuff.
Totally.
Mm-hmm.
All right, here, the next question. I'm currently in a boot camp, but I'm also considering going back to college to get a computer science degree. Do you think a degree is necessary these days?
Yeah, great question. That's the question we all have, don't we, when we're trying to get back into tech. So necessary is an interesting word because I don't think it's necessary. Plenty of people like Sam, like Brady, like my husband even, like, you know, go to boot camp and then you can have a really fruitful software engineering career. That's not to say it's easy, I guess. The common kind of experience that I hear from boot camp grads is like, once you graduate, you're sending like 200 applications a week or a month to get that first job, because that first job is really difficult. And depending on the boot camp and what alumni programs they have, you can connect to other alumni who work at specific companies. And so it's, yeah, from what I've heard, it can be difficult. But I mean, the best part about a boot camp is you get highly specialized training for a specific job. So it's kind of like a trade school more than going to like a university or something. The university side, however, like you spend a longer time there, which means that I think you get to explore more of a breadth of different topics in computer science. So like contrasting a web dev bootcamp curriculum where like you learn JavaScript, you learn React, you learn how to like debug things in the console, like you learn how to you just learn all the skills that you need to do web dev. My computer science degree, like that was like one class, but like I had classes about operating systems. I had classes about compiler construction. I learned 3 different programming languages in one class. And so you're exposed to a lot more just because it's a much longer period of time. In order to get a job, though, some companies will look for that, like, I'm looking for a bachelor's in computer science or a master's in computer science. Personally, I hate it when companies do that because I don't think that's an indication of how good a software engineer is. It's just like, you've done this, cool. But because like universities have a really big network, you meet a lot of people in university. Generally, your network is much bigger, and so you have lots of people at companies who can refer you to the to places. Like if there's a large amount of people from your school who like work at a certain company, then it is easier to get into that company. In reality, my first job I got because I was friends with someone who was like 2 years older than me who went to the same program, and he referred me to their program, and I got my first job there. Whether I needed to do a computer science program just for that is like hard to tell. But yeah, I think it depends on what you want. Do you want like a breadth of computer science knowledge? Do you want to know just how to do the job? And you don't mind like putting in a little bit more extra work to do the job hunt? Everyone's experience is different, but I don't think it's necessary to have a computer science degree.
Cool. I did see a follow-up question in the chat. Do you think that tech companies' views of bootcamp grads have changed over the last couple of years?
That's a good question. I think it definitely has over the last like 5 to 10 years, like longer term for sure. Like more and more boot camps have, like as time goes on, there are more boot camps that spring up that then have boot camp grads where then they go into the industry. And I think as it's becoming more like common and normalized, people are less afraid of like boot camp grads. This is just like also talking from my perspective in the industry where I worked at companies that were really looking to diversify their candidate pool, that were like open to non-traditional backgrounds and stuff. So yeah, I think it has. I also think it's been harder over time for bootcamp grads to get jobs because now there's more and more bootcamp grads. And also, a lot of companies don't hire for junior developers. So, and I don't know how that's changed over time, but just from where I sat in the industry, like my last two companies weren't really keen on hiring junior developers, which is pretty sad. Just because it's an investment for a company to train junior developers to then become senior developers and contribute meaningfully and quickly, which makes sense because of like how companies work and how they want to create results really quickly. But I think generally they have. I wouldn't say it's like changed overnight and now like bootcamp grads can get every job they want, because I don't think that's realistic.
I can agree with that for sure. I know when I was considering going to a boot camp, man, I thought about it for a good at least year and was trying to convince my parents that a boot camp, even though it wasn't accredited, it was a legit way to get into an industry. And had talked to a neighbor who was an engineering manager, and he was not for it. He had been in the industry for decades and was telling me to like go back to a community college and take classes if that's really what I wanted to do. So there was him. And then also recently I was talking to somebody in the East Coast that works for a pretty big kind of conservative company. And they were talking about how they are starting to see such huge value in bootcamp grads as being their interns, because they tend to have a little bit more of like hands-on experience with building things versus even computer science majors. So I feel like I'm hearing more of these little like aha moments from people the more I talk to them across the country. And that probably came from like a trickle down effect from Silicon Valley, like understanding that this was legit, and then the rest of the country kind of took over that mindset.
Yeah, I mean, leave it to Silicon Valley to try to disrupt education, right? Like there was the recent news about how Google is like creating like an alternative university thing, which is going to be way cheaper and stuff. So Silicon Valley is always wanting to disrupt, and I think bootcamp was one way to do that. But yeah, I think like even the experience you had about like that engineering manager being like, I don't know if that's like legit kind of stuff. Like I think that still exists. I don't know if that's a minority, like a small minority or like a big minority or a majority of people who are, because some people are like, I went through a computer science program, so you should too, because that's the only way to legit become a developer, which I kind of categorize as gatekeeping, because I don't like, in reality, I don't use like 95% of the knowledge from computer science, my computer science degree. Sure, it's helped condition my brain to think more logically and problem solve, which each class that I did, but like I'm not using any of my knowledge from operating systems doing iOS development really. Like I can Google that if I really need to. So yeah, I think the sentiment definitely is changing to become more accepting.
Yeah. And I think, I can't remember if I left off that final part where now he has hired people who were bootcamp grads. So that's cool.
That's incredible. Yeah. See, that's like the kind of stuff that like I think more and more people are realizing. It's like, oh, right. Like it's because like you said, like even computer science majors don't have that hands-on experience to like jump in and like know exactly how to contribute quickly, because like a lot of computer science programs don't go over web development or iOS development. Like I did one class in iOS development, and if you told me like, hey, now go get a job in iOS development, I'll be like, heck no, like there's no way, I don't know anything. Versus yeah, I think like spending 10 to 12 weeks in a really intensive immersive program, 40 hours a week doing iOS development, I think I would be like I would have a lot more real world skill. So yeah, I think it's good to see that people are changing their minds about that kind of stuff.
Sam, had I cut you off? Were you going to say something?
Oh no, I was just going to chime in and say it seems like the perception is changing. So people are boot camps are just becoming more mainstream. I think it just takes a while.
Yeah, it's gotta, like if companies are like, you know, we've got to hire more people, like there's not enough talent out there, but then there's like all these bootcamp grads. It's like, dude, like there's like all these people here who are looking for jobs, and all these companies that are looking to hire people. Like it has to meet in the middle. And I personally think hasn't quite met in the middle as easily as it should be, just because of that whole like we don't want to hire junior developer sentiment that's pretty common. But I think more and more it's starting to match up.
Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully.
I also think there's a lot of people working on the problem about like the hiring issue. So I think as these like startups mature, I think it will help solve the problem. Like
Totally.
companies like Interviewing IO and Apprentice, and there's another company called OnRamp that like sets up apprenticeships with companies.
Definitely.
So yeah, I think it'll get there.
Mm-hmm.
All right, here's the next question. Any recommendations or best practices for junior engineers looking for work right now during COVID, particularly ways to get noticed and ways to get a foot in the door?
Yeah. Yeah, what a weird time right now in history because of COVID, huh? Yeah, I think that like ways to get noticed and get your foot in the door is already like I don't think a lot of people know that, but that is the best way to get that first role. Because we're in a digital world, it's definitely harder because you're not like bumping into people. You're not forming like the same kind of relationships that we used to be in like pre-COVID times. I think part of it, and like this is definitely more work. Like I acknowledge that it's harder to find a job now in COVID times than before, but figuring out ways to like market yourself well. So like number one, having like personal projects that you can talk about in your portfolio, being able to like speak to your project, speak to your skills, like in addition to actually building those skills, obviously. And then being able to talk about like what you've done and like forming relationships with people already in the industry, I think is important. I've seen a lot of activity on LinkedIn for that recently, of people like sharing stuff, talking about how they're looking for a job. Other people go about it by making a Twitter account and like talking about their experiences of being a developer. I think the exposure that you get from like being on like social media is definitely one way to do it. And I recognize that that's not for everybody, but I've seen that to be pretty effective. I mean, even for me, like before I was kind of like on the internet as an internet person, I mean, I would get like emails every once in a while from recruiters, but then once I was more of an internet person and people started watching my videos, I would get way more just because it's like, oh, I'm like, who's out there? LinkedIn is one way to do it, but there's like so much data on there. If you're on social media like Twitter or Instagram or like Medium or anything else, your reach is a lot wider and people kind of can recognize you as either like an expert or someone who's sharing their experience or someone they can connect to. And so I think that's one way of just like widening your sphere of influence, I guess. Becoming a little bit of an influencer is one way to do it. Which is such a weird word, influencer. I know there's a lot of like weird stigma around that job title. But yeah, that's one way to do it. And then I think like if you're kind of not into being like in a public, like having a public image like that, then like going to events like this, connecting with other people, setting up one-on-one like meetings for 30 minutes to an hour to people existing in the community, signing up for mentorship opportunities. Every day I look on Twitter, someone is like, I want to help people in COVID times. Like I will help mentor people. Send a DM my way. So there's a lot of people in the industry who are reaching out, as well as programs that help connect junior devs to people in the industry. So taking advantage of those opportunities. It's like it feels a little bit unfair sometimes that like the way that you get opportunities is to like build these relationships, because in reality everybody has a chance at a job and it should be fair. But like we are more likely to choose people who we are comfortable with, who we trust. I think that's very like human of us to do that. And so if you can build a better relationship with someone in the industry, more than just like everybody else, I guess, like get to know them, like get to know their journey, get to know their personal story, then I think that can be really effective.
How did you get started with YouTube? And do you have any tips for like people who would want to get started?
Yeah, totally.
Like me.
Yeah. So so YouTube I started while I was working at Patreon. I love YouTube. Like YouTube is like one of my favorite inventions of the internet. And like what I think it launched when I was in high schoolish. So I watched a lot of Asian American YouTubers growing up. And they were like my role models. And so when I was at Patreon, it was around the time in my career where I was like, I want to like help other people like get into the industry and talk about my experience. Cause I didn't have a great time during my undergrad in CS. Like I was like I had bad grades, but I felt like I was like, I still belonged there and I still wanted to be a software engineer, but like college is super hard. Industry is also really weird. I had like major imposter syndrome without anybody to talk about it with, except for like a few of my friends. So yeah, I kind of came up with the idea while I was at Patreon, specifically when I went to this like video creators conference, which was just mind blowing. And then yeah, I made my first video a day in the life of a software engineer, and then I just kept making videos about topics that I wish I would have heard or I would have liked to know about more when I was starting out. So like I made videos about like, what does a software engineer actually do? Like, do you need to know math as a software engineer? Here's how you make career decisions. Here's what imposter syndrome is like. So yeah, that's kind of how I started. As far as like advice for like how to get started, I think the hardest part about becoming a YouTuber is literally starting. It's like I've talked to a lot of people who are like, I've wanted to create a YouTube channel, but like I feel like I have to have all these stars align of like having the right equipment, having the right idea, et cetera, et cetera. And I recognize that because like there is a lot of things to consider when creating a video, but literally just putting something out there gets the ball rolling. Like I think oftentimes we try to like shoot for this, like we have to do this perfectly because I want to like be good at it right from the get-go, especially when making YouTube videos. But like consider that when you're watching other people's YouTube videos, that's like probably years and years of like building skills, just getting started, getting over hurdles. And so just starting your journey, and getting started in making videos, learning how to write scripts, learning how to film things, learning how to edit things, generating ideas for videos. Like there's a lot there. And so just like I filmed my first video on my iPhone. So like I didn't let the technology try to stop me, even though it did for a long time. So just kind of like starting from there, I think is the hardest part, but it's like the most important part.
That's great.
Yeah.
Cool. Here we've got some imposter syndrome stuff, maybe. How do you keep the fear and anxiety of taking on or getting assigned tasks that are above your current abilities as a junior dev? Like, how do you manage your own growth, so to speak?
Yeah, great question. Because this happens to me like all the dang time. Like every single project I take on, I'm like, oh no, I'm not ready. Like, why did I sign up for this? This is stupid. Well, so I think managing that fear and anxiety. Anxiety is something that I'm very familiar with because I have like so much anxiety all the time, and everybody does, especially in this day and age, because there's so many things to worry about. But the fact that you're signing up for this project means that you're ready for it. The fact that people are trusting you with this project means that you're ready for it. Sure, you might not have the skills yet for everything, but like if you already did, then you wouldn't be growing. And the way to grow is to sign up for things that you don't know how to do yet. So number one, like acknowledging that like, okay, everything's okay. Like it'll work out. Being a little bit of an optimist here and just being like the universe has trusted me with this task and I can do this is like number one. Also like don't try to push away your feelings. Like acknowledge the fact that you're scared. Don't like I oftentimes have lied to myself. I'm like, I'm fine, but really I was just ignoring my feelings, and that can generate more anxiety sometimes. So acknowledge your feelings, go to therapy, talk to your therapist about this kind of stuff. And then I think as far as like, because like when you sign up for something really big and scary like that, it feels like there's this giant brick wall right in front of you that you have to climb. But when you look closer, you realize that it's actually like a lot of small parts that make up the big thing. So one skill that I think is important to build is to figure out how to break down that big thing into smaller chunks. This is a really common thing in project management and software development. And so like doing that has helped me a lot because It's one thing to say like, go build Google, which is like, I don't know, that's like a super scary feeling task. But if you break down like, okay, what does it mean to build Google? Number one, you have to have a landing page. Okay, like landing page, and then like the search engine backend, and then the results page. Let's break Google into those three chunks, right? All of a sudden it's like, okay, well now there's three like tangible chunks. You can break those three down even further. Okay, now what's in the landing page? Well, there's the Google logo, there's like a little text box and a search button. Okay, that feels super doable. I know how to do those three things. If I don't, I know exactly what to Google to do these things. Search engine stuff. There's a ton of stuff online about search engine things. Even if you don't know what it means, like what the heck does it mean to build a search engine? There's a lot of things, online. You can learn, and as you immerse yourself in that world, it'll just become a little bit easier. Like, okay, like it's about keywords and SEO and all that kind of stuff, and then things just start to become clearer to you. So an analogy that I often like to use is like when you're embarking on something new, and these are for like the gamers out there or anybody who's ever seen or watched a game being played, like going after something new and scary is like you're on a brand new map, and the little map thing on the bottom left corner that's supposed to show you like the rest of the world, it's completely blank because you haven't explored it yet. But as you keep moving around and you explore like different edges of the map, then like the map reveals itself more and more and more, and the next thing you know exactly where that rock is, and you know exactly where like the little like evil things that can hurt you are, and you know how to like avoid that. And I think it's a lot of just about like figuring out what you don't know, because not knowing what you don't know is the scary part. But once you know what you don't know, then it becomes more tangible. So I often think about like when I'm trying something new, I'm like, I'm in a dark, scary place and I don't have any lights and I don't know what the map looks like, but that's okay because I have a flashlight and I will figure it out little by little.
Very well said.
Thanks.
Here we go. Yeah, I always feel so on top of the world as I finish up a ticket, like, yes, I figured that out. And then that is immediately followed by a new ticket that I'm usually like, oh no.
Yeah, no, totally. And it's scary too. I think there's also something to be said about like comfort zones, where like, if you've ever seen kind of like a visual representation of comfort zones, like right in the middle is where your comfort zone is, but then there's rings outside of that. And as you travel further out, it just becomes scarier and scarier and scarier. And I think there's also kind of like an art to like navigating that too, of like not going all the way to the outer ridges of the circle immediately, because that can be really shocking and super scary sometimes. But thinking about it in terms of like, okay, eventually I want to get to the outer circle, but in order to get to the outer circle, I start with the inner circle first, and then just kind of like go out that way. I think that's an important thing too, because I think a lot of people get discouraged by like jumping too much, and then just getting completely lost. So like centering yourself of like, it's okay to come back to your comfort zone and just like be in your happy place where you feel really confident. But then just stretching that little by little with like every Stack Overflow query, you'll learn a little bit more.
Cool. Okay, so this next question, you mentioned that there are a lot of software engineers who want to mentor junior devs. Where can I find these people?
Good question. I don't have like a specific place to look at, and I think maybe some of you might know where these places are too. I find them a lot on Twitter. I follow a lot of like other people in tech, like software engineering as a topic. Like Twitter also has an algorithm, where like if you start liking posts from a certain group of users, who are kind of in a similar topic, then it'll recommend you more and more that kind of content. And so like kind of training your Twitter to show you that kind of stuff will eventually surface like stuff like that. You could also look on Twitter and search like mentor, software engineer, tech, developer, programmer stuff. And then every once in a while, there'll be someone there. There's also a lot of great programs out there. The one that comes to mind for me is called Built by Girls. It's like a mentor, or it's a program that helps girls, especially in high school and college, to break into the industry in tech, no matter what their kind of expertise is, whether it's in software engineering or program management or product marketing or whatever. And there's a lot of programs just like that like help pair people in the industry to people who are developers. Yeah, Sam has a dev Twitter lists and stuff. So like, places like that. Like I think just putting out feelers out, and also sometimes if you want to like ask like, yo, I'm looking for a mentor, that's also good too. If you put that kind of energy out, then people will be like, oh yeah, like I guess I could help. I think honestly the reality is like a lot of software engineers like could be mentors or want to be mentors, but they don't actually think they can be because they don't feel like they know enough. Which is crazy because that's like also just imposter syndrome. And so, yeah, like asking people like, yo, like I do want to learn from you. Like, how can I learn from you is also a great way to do that.
Definitely. I was specifically looking for a mentor for a while, and had at first considered going back to the boot camp that I graduated from, but oh no, they closed, so I couldn't do that. And eventually, it took me a while, but eventually I found there was the Trilogy bootcamp had this opportunity to mentor people. So finally I found that and signed up, and yeah, had somebody written on LinkedIn, like, I'm looking for somebody to mentor me. I feel like I would have jumped all over that.
Yeah, totally. I feel like mentors are such a good way to like ramp up into the industry too, because there's so many things to know about becoming a developer, and having someone you can talk to about that is invaluable. Like Google is also, in a lot of ways a great mentor. But I don't think it can replace that kind of very real human connection that you can have with someone who can not only answer your questions, but also provide context about that question. And also like sometimes just help you feel like validated, and like help manage your imposter syndrome with you, and teach you skills that you didn't even know you needed. So yeah, like mentors are so incredibly important. And if you don't have one, definitely look for one.
Cool. Here's this next question. Post-college, what were your main learning resources between jobs and while on the jobs? Like books, websites, curriculum, aside from Stack Overflow?
I was gonna say Stack Overflow, my main. Yeah, so this is really specific to like iOS stuff, but like if I were to name specific resources, Hacking with Swift is a really good resource for iOS. RayWenderlich.com is a really great resource. If you look up a publisher called Big Nerd Ranch, they have a lot of great iOS development books as well. But generally, I found out about those by talking to people who were already like established iOS developers and being like, yo, like, what should I read? What should I do? Like tutorials and stuff to get ramped up. And that's how I found out about all of those things. So yeah, again, +1 for mentors. I think Codecademy has a lot of great stuff. Udemy has a lot of stuff. Brilliant.org, Skillshare, like coding related, technology related, educational material is everywhere, on YouTube even as well. And I think finding the one that works best for you means that you have to shop around a little bit. But yeah, ask around. Like I think in every technology there is like a top 2 or 3 places to learn this stuff. And so seeing what other people say about that will help you hopefully lead you to the next, to the right direction.
Cool.
These are all really good questions, by the way, everybody.
They ask great questions every single week. It's awesome.
This is great.
Great answers too.
Yeah.
Hopefully they're helpful, and hopefully, yeah, I can at least point you in the right direction if I don't know the answer myself.
So next question here is, do you have any networking tips for introverts? Typically, you'd assume it'd be easier as it's mostly virtual these days, but I'm still feeling a bit of anxiety reaching out.
Yeah, totally. Good question. I myself am someone who flips between like being an extrovert to an introvert, depending on where I'm at in life and what I get energy from. And when I was like coming into the industry, I was like heavily like I like just such a strong introvert, and I totally get the anxiety part of it. I think honestly, the fact that we're in a remote world helps me at least. Like connecting over email helps me a lot because then I can just there are whole email conversations I've had with people without doing video chats because like we're comfortable with that, and like I can actually think about the words that I'm going to use, reply in my own time, like email as well as like anything text-based communication can be really good. I think like video calls like this are also a little bit more comfortable than going out somewhere to like a place with a bunch of people you don't know. One-on-one conversations I think are a lot easier to manage for introverts and extroverts because you know exactly like who you're talking to, and stuff like that. So setting things up like that. As far as the anxiety part of it goes, yeah, like there is a lot of anxiety in talking to people you don't know. I still have a lot of anxiety reaching out to like people that I really look up to and that I want to learn from. But something that I've like started doing for myself that I learned in therapy, again, like really recommend going to therapy for everybody, regardless, is figuring out like why I'm anxious, like what am I actually afraid of, like why am I worrying, and then challenging those notions. Oftentimes, like when I'm really anxious about meeting someone, I'll be like, I'll be scared because I'll be like, I don't want them to think that I'm like not worth their time, or what if like they think that I'm, you know, not a good person, or I'm not technical enough, or I'm not something enough. But then I'm just like, okay, well, like it's not for me to decide for them, or so then I challenge them, like it's not for me to decide for them whether it was a good use of time for me or them. Like that'll happen when it happens, and then if you know something bad happens, I can reflect on it and learn from that. Number one. Like what if they don't think I'm technical enough or whatever enough? Well, everybody has different value sets and everybody looks for different things in different people. And sure, some people might think I'm not technical enough, but should that bother me? No, because I know that like I am trying my best and I've done everything that I can. And so then like it's just like little by little, I'm just like, okay, like there's actually not a lot to be afraid of. Still acknowledging the feelings that I'm afraid of it. And like, so when I go into these calls, like my voice is shaking and I have a stomach ache and I'm like, why did I do this? I want to drop out right now. But in reality, like knowing that if you do this, like if it, whatever that might be, like reaching out to a mentor, reaching out to a fellow software engineer, like knowing what you're going to get out of it, and like feeling like you're moving forward, and like knowing that you could benefit from this call in such huge ways, can hopefully like that can be the main focus of it and drown out a little bit of the fear and stuff.
Awesome. I like that you've mentioned, I think like twice now, therapy. I also, I also think that it is really important. And I know that I had, so her title is like life coach, but I worked with a life coach and didn't even realize that I needed to work through all of this imposter syndrome that I had when I first started in the industry. But I don't think that I would have gotten through nearly as much had I not been working with her. So it's really helpful for like staying accountable and forcing yourself to dig through those issues of like, why is this that this is popping up right now?
Totally. Yeah. And it's work. It's also, I think, you know, a privilege to be able to go to therapy. And I recognize that. But if you can, like being able to work through that, and like figure out how your brain works. Cause like you're, especially in software engineering, where it's like a very like mentally heavy, like job where like you are literally using your brain and not really actually using your body to do like the work. Like having a really healthy brain to clear your mind and like help you understand how you think through things, I think is like a really, really good investment and thing to do for yourself. I've been going to therapy for like 3 or 4 years now. I've seen different therapists for different things, and it's always super helped me. I just have like general anxiety But like I've noticed that I can kind of reason through unreasonable like thoughts that I have in my brain much easier now. So yeah, there's just a lot of skills. There's a lot of different kinds of therapists out there. I'm as much as I like talking about therapy and I'll talk about my own experiences, I'm not your therapist. So like finding professional help and like working through that thing one-on-one with you, I think is invaluable. And like, yeah, like the tech is a really like stressful, high-paced environment too, and that can really like affect your brain in ways as well. So having someone to talk to about that kind of stuff is really important.
Great. All right, next question here is, I saw it come in earlier and I think it has a second part. I'm just gonna go ahead and read them both together. As a junior dev, I feel I have no idea what I'm doing at times, even though fundamentally I know what I should be doing. Should I ask for help? Versus then the second part down here, then comes the thought of asking for help too often, pushing through, like, should I push through and just figure stuff out on my own?
Yeah. I'm guessing this is like whoever asked this question is like on a team already, so they have people that they can ask. I think it's a really tricky balance to learn of like how do you ask for help but not too often that I'm like annoying them. I think there's a couple of like core principles you can follow with this stuff. So if you like don't if you get into a place where you're like, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm so lost, like help, figuring out like, okay, is there actually anything that I could be doing? Like, are there queries that I could try? Are there other debugging methods that I haven't tried? Are there other people, other resources I could refer to? Like just kind of exhausting that, like, okay, what could I do to help myself right now? And doing that. And like granted, like you might not know all the things you could be doing, and that's fine, but like at least like with your current mental capacity, like do all the things that you think you could be doing. Even if it's like, you know, not obvious or whatever. And then when you get to a point where you're like, I literally have no idea how to move forward, then you talk to somebody. Granted, you also don't want to spend like an entire 2 weeks like just trying to figure it out on your own on this one thing. I think time is also of the essence. So like generally like that principle of like do everything you can by yourself first, paired with like, but time box it, like don't spend more than I would say like 2 days, maybe even one day. Like personally, I don't like nowadays I'm like if I get stuck on something for longer than 4 hours, I'll ask somebody, at least just for like a second opinion on the thing that I'm stuck on. So I think that could be like a way to go about it. You could also just try asking lots of questions and like not, you know, see how that goes. And then you can also ask that person for feedback and be like, am I asking too many questions? Is it too often? Am I bothering you? Like what are some things that I could do to like help with this interaction? Because I don't want to like be a burden, but I also want to learn, and I also want to you know, if is like be self-sufficient eventually. So yeah, I think asking for feedback is invaluable. I think the pitfalls to fall into here are like asking the same question over and over and over again to somebody. So yeah, if you just like keep asking like, how do you do this? Like more than twice, I think. Like if you have to ask like twice, then just write it down somewhere. But if you have to ask more than that, then it can become kind of a nuisance because it's like, dude, I already like answered your question. Like write it down or something. Like that's a lot of context switching for me too. So yeah, I think that's a pitfall. And yeah, like waiting too long before asking is also a pitfall too. Like never asking a question is also like really counterintuitive because then you spend most of your time getting lost and not enough time actually doing the thing. So like managing that balance as well. Also asking different people on your team. Like some people are more willing to lend their time than others because of, you know, either their personality or because they have more time or because they really want to help junior devs. So like kind of asking around to different people. Like I remember when I was like in my first year, I was like, I'm going to ask like this kind of question to these people, to this group of people. I'm going to ask this question to this group of people. And when I'm like really lost and I need help and I don't want any judgment from someone, I'm going to ask this person because they'd never judge me for that. So I had like a mental map of like, where do I go? And then it also makes it so that you're not asking one person all of your questions as well, like kind of distributing that to lots of different people. Helps the people that you're asking, but it's also a great way to build relationships. Like working with people on things and asking them questions is like, I think, a good way to like establish a rapport with someone.
Great point. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, just wanted to add, I talked about it last week. So once you do get into a company, I highly recommend trying to set up like one-on-ones and just coffee chat, or just go for a walk, or if we're still remote, just set up like 10 minutes to chat with people on your team, and maybe even other people at the company, depending on where you work at. Because then you can get a feeling of like who you're comfortable asking questions to and stuff like that.
Totally. Yeah, I always do that whenever I go to a new job. I like set up that one-on-one, and then I always ask them, I'm like, how can I ask you for help? Like, what do you, which, like, I guess I always try to get a feel of like, how often are they available for me to ask questions, and when I do ask questions, in what format. So like, would they prefer that I go to their desk and I'm just like, yo, what's up? Like, I have a question. Or would they prefer me to like compile a list of stuff first, set a like schedule time with them in the week and sit down and go through it. Or sometimes it's like, just Slack, just like text-based communication when it happens so that they can reach me async. Yeah, there's a lot of different ways to ask questions. And I think learning how to adapt and work with the people that you're asking questions to is a skill. And I think it's totally buildable. And like, you will make mistakes probably, but that's okay because you can learn from them. And yeah.
Yeah, I love that point of trying to set up expectations ahead of time, if possible. That was something I hadn't really thought of until I was at Dev Bootcamp, where they would try to tell us to do a little check-in at the beginning and kind of set some expectations from the get-go. And that opens it up a little bit, even if you don't think to say. Also, I'm open to changing if you think of like extra feedback along the way, but having that set up from the beginning might open it up in the first place.
Yeah, it's just so easy. I feel like in any relationship, communication is so key. And it can help like get rid of and prevent weird, awkward interactions really quickly. Because if you have the expectations like talk like in an hour, it's so much easier than like spending months with this person and just being like, I don't know what they like and I don't know what they do like. And sometimes they were mad at me, but like, I don't know if like it's because of what I said or because of something else. And it's just like, instead of just worrying about that and dancing around and like always trying to predict someone's mood and like all of that, just like set expectations. Like I always set expectations where I'm like, if there's something that I'm doing that you don't agree with or you think I could do better, like give me that feedback right away. That way, like, because I always am like, I don't know, I think they like don't like me because they said that one thing weird, or like they used a period in like a Slack channel sentence, and I think they're just being really like trite and like mean to me. But like, if I tell them, I'm like, if I set the expectation, I'm like, if you do have like any issues, like just talk to me, then like I can just get rid of all of those feelings, because I know that if there is an issue, they will bring it up with me. And so it goes both ways. You set expectations with them and they set expectations with you, and those expectations will change over time, but just at least starting from like the same place, I think is a really good thing to do when you're starting off on a team. And even if you've been on that team for 2 or 3 years, if you still don't know, still a good thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
I got one more recommendation for asking questions. You can always ask the interwebs as well. Just
totally.
send your question out on Twitter and LinkedIn. You never know, you might get help from like if you have a question about a library or something, you might get help from like the person who like made that library. That's the awesome thing about Twitter.
That's so true. Yeah. And I would also say like it's a great way, but also proceed with caution sometimes, because you might not get the answer that you want. Like I think one of the pitfalls of Stack Overflow is that it's a great resource that like has almost every answer you could like have for every tech question, but like what a lot of like new developers face is like they ask a question and then it gets downvoted into infinity because it wasn't like formatted right or something. Like that happened to me, and I was just like, I was just trying to ask a question, like I'm new to this. And it was really like, I was like, man, people on the internet hate me, like I'm not good enough or whatever. But like that's not true. Like there's just like certain communication methods and styles and particular things about like interacting on platforms that people like and don't like, and hopefully, like, I guess I'm just trying to say, like, don't let that make you feel too bad.
And heck, now you are a person of the internet.
I know. Crazy.
Okay, here we go. Next question is, what path do you have any recommendations for someone going into VR development?
Oh man. Well, I don't know. But my guess would be, okay, so like let me just like imagine, like if I were to go into VR development today, how would I go about doing that? I guess like I would first of all look up VR development on Google and then just kind of like read around there. I would plug into VR development communities because there are a lot, like Unity developers, like Oculus developers, other VR technologies that I don't know and I can't name. There are communities like that, Slack channels, Discord channels, like discussion boards, whatever. Plug into those, meet people who are VR developers and talk to them. That's about as far as I can give advice for. But yeah, I think that would be like talk to other VR developers. I don't know, unfortunately. I'm sorry, but yeah.
If whoever asked this question is not yet in our Slack, there was some discussion in it not too long ago. So maybe join and do some searching on VR.
Yeah. Just like walk into VR land. Like I think that's honestly like any technology, just like get into that world and like immerse yourself, talk to people, make connections, like start reading documentation and technology, like familiarize yourself with the lingo, all of that stuff.
Awesome.
Yeah. Slack search is the best thing after Google search.
Yes.
But yeah, there was a conversation, I think, last week if people want to search in our Slack. Yeah.
Cool. Next question here. What are some red flags to look for when you're looking for jobs? Like unrealistic job expectations or anything?
Yeah. Oh man, I feel like I could talk about this one for hours. Red flags when looking for a job. So, personally for me, I look for jobs where I can value the company and the experiences I get from a company as much as they value me. At least like from the horror stories that I hear about working at a company often stem from like companies not treating like their employees well enough, or it's not as like mutual enough. So like that's the thing that I mainly look for. So like when I'm going through an interview process, I ask a lot of questions related to that. So things like, how are you going to evaluate my performance? If it's like, I'm going to evaluate you based on how many lines of code you write, that's a red flag to me, because I'm like, to me, like the lines of code doesn't really like exemplify anything about a software developer. It might just talk about how wordy you are, stuff like that. Toxic work environments, just as a general thing, big red flag to me. Being a woman in software engineering, I'm not about that. I don't want that. Also, like places that like just don't believe in diversity, like also not about that either, because if I have to spend like a good chunk of my time convincing people that I belong at a company, nah, like bye. That's not good either. Other things are, yeah, like what is my manager like? How is my communication with them like? Does it feel really strained? Do they respect me as a person? Do I feel like I'm being listened to and heard, as well as like being valued for my contributions? And do I feel like I can learn from them? those are less like red flags or like orange yellow flags, but those are also things that I look for. I don't like working with brilliant jerks, and if there's a lot of them at a company, then that's kind of a red flag to me as well. Yeah, I guess just generally like red flags are usually like if I are like people or systems or companies that are not willing to change the way that they do things or consider that, and also like they just don't respect people. And luckily, like I've rarely ever encountered these, and I think most companies are not in this category. But yeah, like I don't know. I oftentimes look for like matching value sets when I go to a company, because you spend a lot of time at a company. You spend more time with people who you work with than some of your family members. And so as much as like it's important to have that like work and life separation, I still want work to be a place that I enjoy being at and I feel comfortable being in. And sometimes it just comes down to like, do my values match with them?
Sam, is now the time that we post key values?
Coming up.
Awesome. I'm going to move on to the next question. How would you balance the feeling that you have been dedicating 100% of your time to development when first learning with avoiding burnout and losing passion?
Yeah, good question. I think the answer is different for everybody because everybody deals with like learning something new differently. I think I always challenge the notion that you have to be doing something 100% when you're first starting out. I think there is a lot to learn. I acknowledge that there's like so much to learn, and so many different um, like technologies and patterns and stuff that you have to like put into your head before you even can like feel like you're at that starting line. But everybody is different. Everybody learns in different ways. Everybody absorbs information in different ways. Everybody has different life situations, like some people are caregivers, some people like aren't. And so like it just depends on your life situation on how you can and want to spend your time. So I think just being aware of that, of like, how do you want to spend your time? And also like, what do you want to get out of it? Like if you set a goal for yourself where you're like, I want to be a software developer in a month, then yeah, you're probably going to have to crunch. But that's because you set that goal for yourself, and that's because that's what you want. But like, I don't think like you're the only person really, I believe, and this might be different for other people, but you're the person who decides your fate for you. And you're responsible for that. And so like if you do set expectations for yourself, figuring out, why do I have this expectation for myself? Is it important? And just go with that. So yeah, it's always going to be a push and pull. Like there's always going to be times where you feel like you have to give more time or you're not spending enough time. The guilt will definitely happen, but learning how to like ride out those waves, I think is a way to manage that a little bit.
Mm-hmm. I, again, kind of coming back to like setting expectations, I like the idea of sitting down and kind of planning out, like, this is what I hope my week is going to look like, spending this amount of time on this thing. And then like also understanding, I love the concept. I haven't actually read the book Atomic Habits, but I like a lot of the ideas that I hear coming from that book, where you're more likely to stick with something over the long term and make a lot more progress if you pace yourself. So
totally,
if you're not telling yourself, I'm going to spend 12 hours all the next 20 days cramming to become a software engineer. Yeah, just
wait. You never read Atomic Habits?
I haven't actually read it. I love it.
Aren't you a James Clear fan?
I am, but you can watch him a lot on YouTube. There are so many articles written about him.
You should check it out. It's kind of a quick read. It's not very dense. It's mostly like common sense, but he writes really well, so it's still worth like reading.
Yeah, and
I
it's not,
think so.
from what I've gathered over the years, he weaves his own like personal experience into everything. Like they're concepts that have been around, I think, but yeah.
Yeah, the
Surprise!
expectation part is hard to manage too, because we always expect a lot out of ourselves. And I think it's again kind of going back to that like comfort zone thing, where like your comfort zone is like your truth of like how you actually spend your time, and then everyone has an idea of how they want to spend your time. But if you are like, you haven't coded an ounce of anything today, and then tomorrow you're like, I'm going to code 12 hours, like that's probably not going to happen, because that's a lot. Like that's a lot to do that. I'm not saying that anybody can't do that here. Like you can achieve whatever you want to, but I think in order to avoid burnout, like it's literally like building muscle. Like, not to use like a gym like working out reference, I'm not like a gym rat or anything, I promise, but like you are conditioning muscles, and like you have to like go slow or else you're going to hurt yourself. And the more that you do consistently, little by little, over a period of time, you see bigger results. We often talk about successes in software development, like, oh, this was made overnight, this was made like yesterday in that dude's garage, but like that's not true. Like everyone spends an enormous amount of time coding everything, and not only like the amount of time that it takes to build something, but the amount of time it takes to learn that thing and build those skills. So yeah, I would just like be realistic and just push yourself little by little every day. And the next thing you know, you like climb a mountain and you're like there and you're like super proud of yourself. So
Cool. Here's another question. This person is I'm going into my first role, and I'm nervous about being able to form strong relationships to ask for help and grow into the role while working virtually. Any advice?
Yeah, I think the one-on-ones that we've mentioned about setting up time like on an ongoing basis with somebody, I think is really could be a really good way to do that. I think in some ways it's like the only way to do that right now. But yeah, set up like 30-minute one-on-ones on a weekly basis with people that you want to connect to. Every meeting, like depending on kind of your personality, their personality, what you want to get out of it, like kind of think about what you want to talk about. Sometimes I set like agendas, and like I've had meetings where I'm like, I want to talk about how you got into software engineering. And then afterwards I'll tell you how I got into software engineering. And then I'll talk about where you want to go in software engineering and how I can help you. And sometimes it happens that way. Other times it's just like, we talk about a common interest that we found for like 30 minutes, and that's okay too. Yeah, just like if you were to meet someone and you were, just gonna spend time with them, what would you talk about? Yeah, I think the one-on-ones can be really helpful.
And that might be something, if you're having one-on-ones with your manager, that might be something you could see if they can kind of encourage among the team.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because also, like, if you don't know what you want to talk about too, you can also ask your manager, be like, yo, I'm going to talk to like Samantha in like 30 minutes. Like, what should I talk about with her? Because I'm like, I want to get to know her and like build a rapport, but I don't know who she is. Like, you can lean on your manager for that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Is there a central list of online tech conferences coming up in the next year?
I'm sure there is. I don't know where it is, but I'm sure there is. Like online tech conferences, like list. I don't know. I'm Googling something right now. Like top virtual tech conferences to attend in 2020 as a Medium thing. TechRepublic.com is 2020 tech conferences list. Start there, I guess.
You can also check out our Slack. We post a lot of events.
And by we, he really means him.
No, the Slack is growing, so other people are starting to post.
You're the core, though.
Before, it was just me in the Slack.
And sometimes I would react to things. Okay, next question here. You mentioned OnRamp. Is there a list of programs like OnRamp out there? Or do you know of any other suggestions, I guess?
Oh, I don't know that I mentioned a program called OnRamp.
That was me. That was
okay.
The only thing I can think of off the top of my head is Prentice. So I'll post a link. We also did a junior developer happy hour with the founder of Prentice. I'll post that link as well.
Let's see.
Yeah, y'all are asking me for like resources and stuff, but this Slack group, y'all, join the JDHH Slack group. Sounds like there's a lot of good stuff.
All right, here, we'll skip to this question. How did you get started with iOS development and why did you choose iOS?
Yeah. So I got started because my very first job out of college was a program at Intuit, which was like a rotational development program. I don't think they have it anymore, but some companies do this where like for 1 or 2 years, for early career like people, because they have a lot of tracks, you rotate to different teams every 6 months so that you can try out different teams, you can try out different technologies. I was in the program because I was like, I don't know what the heck I want to do. I want to do something cool, but not security because that seems hard and I don't know anything about that. And so I told my job placing person like I'd be down to do web or iOS. And it just so happened that there was a position on the iOS team. So that's kind of actually how I started. Like I had taken the one mobile programming class in college before where I built an iOS app, but it was like with a team of people. And that kind of helped me like get started. But in reality, my very first day at that job, I was like, I have no clue what I'm doing. Like, I don't know the programming language. I barely know how to use Xcode. Like, I need help. And luckily, because it was a team that signed up to take someone like me on, like I had a mentor. There was also like an intern who had been there for like 3 months prior to me. So like he helped me out. So yeah, that's how I started.
Do you have any resources you'd recommend to learn iOS?
Yeah.
This one you've actually...
Yeah. Well, I mentioned this before, but my favorite one right now is hackingwithswift.com. It's made by a guy named Paul Hudson. He's one of like the beloved people in the community who's really, really great at writing tutorials about iOS development. He's also just a really like nice guy. He's also very knowledgeable in Swift. I really like his tutorials because not only is it like hey, copy paste this into your code and then run it, like, oh my God, you have an app. He also explains a little bit more about what you're doing and why you're doing it, which I think is important in order to actually establish that like foundational skill set. So yeah, 100% like hacking with Swift is my rec.
Cool. This one is, what was your favorite company you worked at and why?
Oh man, that's like asking like who your favorite child is and stuff. If I had to choose, I mean, I liked working at all of them for different reasons. Like at Intuit, I learned how to be a really good product developer because they teach everybody to think in a very design and product oriented way. I really liked Patreon because I was working in an area that I've always been really passionate about. And Netflix was just a really cool experience. I was like, I didn't ever think I would work for a FANG company before. My team was also incredible. I had an amazing manager. And it was awesome to get to work on a product that like everybody uses everywhere. But I think if I had to choose, I think I really enjoyed working at Patreon. That was like my one startup experience. I joined Patreon because I had just like known about it from like YouTube creators that I had followed, like Keena Granis and Smarter Every Day, who I'd looked up to for years. And so I joined there. I think I grew a lot there because I was like the only iOS dev there for like for like half my time there. So I was like kind of forced to just be like, literally, you're only the person who can code this app. So figure it out. Which was very scary, but like really helped me grow in a lot of ways. And luckily I had a really supportive manager to kind of help me through that because he had a little bit of iOS development experience. But it was just a cool company to work for. I joined when it was like 50 people, and when I left, it was 200. The thing that was cool about it was that I worked with other people who were also really into the creative arts. And one of the reasons why I went into software engineering was because I thought it was cool that you can combine code with anything. Like you can be in the medical field, you can be in the space and aeronautics field, you can be in like literally anything. And so, yeah, being able to combine like my love for the creative arts and YouTube and podcasts and arts and stuff in general with my skills was just like a stars colliding moment. And that was true for like a lot of the other people who were working there too. So that was a really special experience. When I worked there, or when I interviewed there, I had my like on-site interview at the office in San Francisco, and I walked in right during lunch hour, and like the old office was really cool. It was like kind of looked like a tree house, like definitely wasn't meant to be used as a tech company space, but it was. And then like there was a full like jazz set happening right in front of me because there was a lot of like musicians in the office and they were playing, and I was just like, dude, like I have to freaking ace this interview because this is so cool. So yeah, it was really cool. And I left that job. Like it wasn't the perfect job forever, because I wanted to grow in other ways. And the company was growing in ways too that I was just like, I mean, it's okay, but like it's not exactly what I signed up for. So yeah, I think it was fun. And I will always remember working there as a very fond memory.
How brutal was the Netflix interview?
Honestly, it wasn't very brutal for me.
Oh
But
yeah.
every single team interviews in a different way. And depending on who they're looking for, they ask different questions. So if I interview for Netflix today, I very well might not get a job because they might be looking for someone completely different. It's like super highly tailored. And luckily they were looking for someone with my skill set and my background. And the interview kind of reflected that. And so I'm like a product developer. Like I love building products. I love working with designers and product managers. And so the interview was tailored towards that. So there was a really good take home. There was like my on-site interview was a lot around like collaborating and like talking about solutions and then actually like pseudo coding those solutions kind of stuff. So yeah, it wasn't that bad, but that's not to say that it's easy and that you might have that same experience too.
That's great to hear. Here's the next question. Would you consider iOS development to be synonymous to front-end development?
If you are a front-end developer, I think my answer would be yes. Like generally, if you're talking about a tech stack, just because if like in a tech stack, there's the front end and the back end, and like iOS sits on top of the back end alongside like front end web dev, but it's very different. The concerns are completely different. If you ask an iOS developer if it's synonymous, like you might get a mixed answer of like yes and no's, because iOS development like has like it's not always like things aren't guaranteed in iOS versus web. On web, you can basically like mostly guarantee that you're going to have an internet connection. You can guarantee that you have the entire you have a lot more memory and like computing power to work with because you're on a computer, or even if you're on a phone too. Versus iOS apps, there's a lot more concerns about memory for networking. Most iOS apps have their own like local database that they're working with. So it's like almost also kind of like backend, except you're not writing APIs because it's not like it's all just in one place. But yeah, mixed answer.
All right. So this is the last question here, and then I saw a couple stragglers in the Jitsi chat I can try to go back to. But any interesting projects you're working on, or any that you're willing to share, of course?
Yeah. Let's see. Projects. I'm guessing like software development projects is what this question is asking. I'm working on a shopping list app, which like I know is not like the sexiest product out there, but I have been looking for a good shopping list app forever that doesn't try to make me like make recipes that I don't want to make, and also lets me shop at like Asian grocery stores and not just like American grocery stores. So my brother helped me design the UI for a shopping list app that is a lot more flexible than the ones that are out there. And I'm working on it using a new technology called Swift UI, which is pretty brand new in the Apple world. It's a new way to create UI, which is more similar to React on web. It's a declarative style programming language. And I've been working on it for like a couple months now because it's just like a side project, but it's been really fun. I actually stream my coding sessions on Twitch every Friday. And so that's been a fun thing to work on.
That sounds stressful, live coding.
It is sometimes, but I have like I kind of enforce like a strict like no backseat coding rule, which like I know people like, you know, tell me to do things in the chat mostly out of kindness to help me through stuff, but it does create that stressful environment where I'm just like, I don't know what I'm doing. But I also like, I'm like, I it's okay. Like I'll figure it out. And if people backseat code too much, I time them out or I ban them because I'm all about the chill vibes and I don't need all that judgment online because I get enough of it on YouTube.
I think
okay. Also, we're hitting the 1:30 mark.
Oh, yeah.
How are you on time, Mayuko?
Yeah, I do have to run soonish, but I can answer a couple more questions.
Okay.
Thanks.
I see. This maybe will be as far back as I go. How do you personally use social media to connect and network with job offers and people in general? Has that played a big role in your own personal success?
Yeah. I don't think I intentionally use social media to connect and network with job offers per se. Like, I don't know. That feels like weird to me. Like, I don't know why, but that feels like a little bit unethical, kind of. Not just like that still happens. Like, I still get recruiter emails and stuff, but I don't know. It's just weird. It feels like I'm gaming the system a little bit. In terms of connecting with people, like that's like my favorite thing to do on social media. I mean, YouTube videos are a way to do that. So a lot of the content that I create is about like creating a connection with other people. Like, a lot of my videos are about software engineering and tech, but like a lot of them also aren't. My most recent video was about being bilingual in English and Japanese. And I did that just because I was like, I want to know the experience of other bilingual speakers in America. So I create content to do that. I share things on Instagram. My grid is like sad looking because I'm not very good at that part, but sharing stories about my day to day is something that I do on Instagram. I ask a lot of questions to other people because like as much as like people ask me questions about the state of the industry, I've only lived one part of it, like a tiny part of the industry. And so I love hearing about other people's experiences in universities and boot camps at their jobs. And so yeah, it's been both like I put stuff out there sometimes, but because social media is what it is now, I've been able to connect with people in their work too. So a lot of like friends I've met online since starting this, which has been really, really special.
Great. I think that's the end of the questions. So I can go ahead and stop recording and we can, if I don't know how long like you're able to stay around, but if you need to get going and then other people want to come off of mute and say hi, that's typically a thing that we do at the end. So cool. I will click that button and get that started.